I was thinking we'll give another 2-3 minutes to people having tea, but the panelists are eager to speak. Because what is happening now, since yesterday, there is a 10-minute lag going on. So people are still enjoying tea and trickling down gradually. So maybe in the meanwhile, I can invite the panelists to settle down and start a brief intro, and by the time we warm up, maybe people will also trickle down. Yeah, they're already coming in. Thank you for coming to the audience. Big thank you, because this is a topic I think we have been discussing since the inaugural session. Community stewardship has become a key word, but when it comes to practicing it, when it comes to promoting it, we find very few takers. So this is going to be an exciting session with a great panelist joining us, and with the audience we'll make it more exciting, more interactive. So today we are going to talk about community stewardship and indigenous knowledge, the way ahead. It is based on some work which is already going on in some part of India with some partners. Some of them are already here, and with others we are trying to take it forward. Can I request now the panelists to join me on the stage? Mr. Dimgong Rangmai, who is Executive Director of Real of Nature-Based Action from Manipur. So please give a big hand to my friend Dimgong. And this is going to be a rare session where two Northeast people will be there. So, and the second is another great friend, Mr. Amba Jamir, which is a policy development strategist, guiding many of us in this field of conservation and working with communities. Big hand to Amba. We have with us also Gajala Paul, who is Executive Director of Samet Trust. Gajala, please. And Pravanjan Mahapatra, who is coming from Intellicap and working also as a project manager consultant in JICA. So to set the stage, I would request my colleague Anjali Agrawal to make a brief presentation. Is there Anjali? Yeah, so we'll just, yeah. So we have a small presentation to set the context, what is stewardship, what we are doing, and what questions we are trying to look at. So Anjali Agrawal, who is from Landstack and also collaborating with Foundation for Ecological Security around this work, will be making the brief presentation, and then we'll start the session. So is it visible to everyone? Yeah.
So hello and a very good afternoon to everyone. So let me start with a very brief context setting on stewardship, because it's a relatively new concept. It's sort of a framework which helps us look at what communities are doing, how communities are stewarding, and why they are stewarding. So, next slide. So, before we explain what stewardship is, like why the need for stewardship? Most of the world's forest, 36% of world's forest and 80% of world's biodiversity is in community territories. is within the territories which are managed by indigenous communities. So why is that? Because communities have been stewarding their resources since centuries, and they are most ably placed to respond to climate change. So that's why most of the forests are within the community protected areas. But over the years, we have seen recently, since the COP15, that there's a very increase in investments from climate finance, and these investments, and there's a very high interest in nature-based solutions, and these nature-based solutions mostly are top-down projects. The project development is very top-down, and we have been hearing this in many of the sessions, in the climate finance session, which was just held before this, and even in the yesterday's climate action session, we talked a lot about how this project development is top-down. It's mostly focused on what the project developer wants and what the carbon markets want. They just want one sort of output, which is they want more carbon. But because of that, the project entire process of development of the project is very top-down, and this is a standardized set of interventions without regards to what is actually needed by the communities. Previous slide. We can move to the previous slide. Focus in India is largely on mitigation, and mitigation also in the form of renewable energy projects. And this was discussed extensively in yesterday's session. And because of the focus on renewable energy projects, a lot of land is actually needed when you are to undertake wind farms, solar farms. And where does that land come from? It comes from communities. Many areas in western Rajasthan are going to have already been developed as solar parks. And where are those lands coming from? Those are lands which the communities called common lands, but which have been designated as wastelands by the government. And carbon rights are tied to land rights, which means that whoever the land belongs to has the carbon rights. And because in India the tenure regime is very patchy, in Northeast there is a good amount of autonomy, and the communities have certain sort of ownership and control over their land resources. But other parts of the country, even after FRA, there has been very patchy implementation. So some communities, though some states have been good in implementation of FRA and recognition of rights, other states have not. And again, as I mentioned, there's a very reductionistic carbon-focused approach of these projects, and these projects are just focused on this one carbon output and outcome. But when you ask communities, what do you think is important when you're planting trees, or within forest, what is important? They would never say carbon is an important output for them. The forest, they look at forests for many things, but never for carbon. And language in which the markets operate. We have a lot of discussion since yesterday on how the language is very important. And the language in which carbon markets operates it's very complicated, and it's not in favor of communities. They don't understand what the markets are saying. So next slide. Now we'll move on to what is stewardship. So this framework, it's a framework to sort of help us understand what communities are already doing. It's a framework developed by West and Enquist, and in one of their papers, and where they say stewardship has 3 essential attributes. Stewardship is taking care of your resources, but how? By the help of 3 essential attributes which stewardship has: care, knowledge, and agency. What is care? Care is the desire to look after something. But how do you look after that something? How is that desire defined? It is defined by emotions, by values, by morals, by very intangible things which are difficult to describe and put into words. And communities have all of these. They have an ethic of care, which cannot be described very simply, but they have been caring for forests in centuries, and they have a lot of relationships, cultural practices, religious practices, and other things also. They feel a responsibility towards the forest. And knowledge, they have a lot of knowledge. We have done some surveys where we understood that there was a lot of knowledge on ethno-silviculture, ethno-veterinary, fire control, pest control, how crops can be managed, how zoom landscapes are managed. So a lot of knowledge is there. And the third essential attribute is agency. With agency, what we're trying to say is communities have intrinsic ability to take care of their resources. And how do they do that? They do that with the help of informal institutions. In Northeast, the village councils. In the rest of India, Gram Sabhas, formal, informal groups. And they also have rules and regulations. In Odisha, there is a system called Thingapalli, which was instituted in the community forest movement And during that movement, this Thingapalli, this institution where communities started patrolling their forests through rotational some families go every day to the forest, and the other day the next set of families goes. So this rotational patrolling system was instituted by the communities, and it was a rule which they had put in to conserve the forest. So that is what we mean by agency. Next slide, please. So this is a sort of what we have been exploring over the last 1.5 years. FES along with Landstack and in partnership with LGTVP, we have been trying to understand what the stewardship is, why communities are conserving and how they are conserving within using the care knowledge agency framework. So we have deployed our tools. We have devised a toolkit which has different sets of participatory tools which looks at why communities conserve, along with also ecological outcomes of if they are conserving, is it doing good to the forest or not. Using these set of tools, we sort of deployed them in Odisha, Meghalaya, which were in FES areas, and in Manipur we deployed them in RNBS areas with Dingong support, and that's how the part of deployment. After deployment, we sort of consolidated the findings, and one finding which was emerging was stewardship is not a very static thing. It changes very dynamically, and it exists in a gradient. And it correlates with the bundle of rights that the communities have. The more rights that the communities have, we found the stewardship was more. For example, in Odisha, communities don't have started getting recognition to CFR, through CFR under the FRA framework. So that has helped communities take better care of their forests. So the stewardship ingredient has improved over time. And in Northeast, communities have been traditionally conserving their forests. So the stewardship gradient is high over there. Next slide. So some of the stewardship practices, just to sort of explain like what type of things we have captured. So no live tree cutting, again I was just mentioning the community forest management movement of Odisha. They sort of made this rule during 1980s when they saw heavy deforestation in the forests by something that they called timber mafia. They instituted this rule, no live tree cutting. Then the protection system which I mentioned, Thingapalli. Tending operations, Northeast people do zooming across their forests, and they have a lot of ethno-silvicultural knowledge on copaicing, pollarding, which trees will grow well. So they have a very intricate knowledge on ethno-silviculture. Ethno-veterinary knowledge was huge, both in all the 3 states. Fire control, pest control, soil moisture conservation efforts, all of these are knowledge systems which we capture. Regeneration, they do sowing, sapling collection, wilding collection and propagation. And annual forest cleaning was also one of the activities which we found in the Northeast. Fire management, they have various traditional methods of fire management, just not the things we hear from the from the forest department in terms of fire lines, but a lot of traditional methods they use. The rotational grazing in Odisha was one of the methods we found, which was based on a lot of knowledge of grazing routes, of how forests regenerate. So rotational grazing was one of the things we thought is also a stewardship practice. Although forest department looks at grazing through very negative lens, grazing, if it is done well, it helps improve the forest. So that's what the communities said was their perspective. Sustainable harvesting of tubers, of mushrooms, that was another practice that we captured. Next slide. So this is where Pranabda, our moderator, he'll step forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anjali. And we have also full house now, so thanks to audience also. So community, we have been listening a lot of things regarding community commons interaction, community conservation interaction, community market interaction, and how this whole in the morning plenary, the different design of Samaj Bazaar Sarkar relationships. So many of you who are working in this natural resource domain, would have seen the debates in 70s where community was seen as a polluter, poor as polluter. Poor as blamed for pollution, poor as blamed for degradation. So most of the land degradation was attributed to poor. They are deforesting the forest, they are degrading the wasteland. Then we see when climate change coming in, poor was seen as a victim of climate change. Community was seen as a victim of climate change. And we tried to say them, no, let us give them some funding, some support so that they can adapt to climate change. But now, we are in a stage where community is at struggling between a kind of two kind of branding. One branding we saw just the earlier session we were discussing climate finance, the burden on the community to prove many things, the burden on the community to show standard, the burden on the community to maintain livelihood, and burden on the community to show conservation. But while that burden is coming in, we also try to highlight something which probably give a very different, different status to community and different the way community has been contributing to recognize it better, what you call stewardship. So challenging the burden argument, challenging the way state and market want community to respond to climate action, rather than changing the whole paradigm and shifting the stage and trying to see if state and market can learn from community how they are stewarding the thing. So this is something, I think in a new paradigm we have to see how we will be able to showcase that. To some extent that paradigm has been proven in agriculture. Many of the pioneers in different states around working around sustainable agriculture, around millets, around agroecology, around natural farming, they have showcased that, and there has been a growing recognition of the community practices around agriculture and agroecology, and we are trying to reward and recognize that. But that recognition and reward has unfortunately not come in forestry, has not come in pasture land management. To wetland, to around water, there has been some recognition. But because I myself come from a forest science background, whatever forestry we have read or we practice, never recognize what community has been doing for years. We always see in the hierarchy of knowledge that the scientific forestry, the modern forestry, far higher, and the community forestry far lower. We call them ethnoforestry, traditional knowledge system. But whoever has witnessed that forestry, particularly in Northeast, it is so sophisticated. So like if you go to the Jhum lands of Cognacs in Mon, the way they pollard and the log trees will be shaming the horticulturist in any European cities. So you go to any European city and see the way trees are pruned and trained, and go to a Jhum garden in the Cognac land in Mon, you will be seeing it very different. So I think, so while community stewardship is already there, we also see in our study there is a gradient. So wherever the state and market have brought in their scientific forestry practices, where they have brought in their management regime, so to a great extent this knowledge system has eroded. And where it has not come to that extent, and where the tenure is well maintained, so that gradient is there. So we are not going to discuss today about what is community stewardship and what are the cases, but I'll be happy to also listen if there is some example coming from panelists. But today we are going to see how to take forward community stewardship. What is the way ahead in community stewardship, particularly when we see in terms of climate finance, in terms of climate action, a lot of efforts are coming around conservation restoration, also coming through this whole, what you call it, payment for ecosystem service market, carbon and biodiversity market. So while these market instruments are coming in and trying to teach community how should they practice their forestry, how should they practice their landscape restoration, and then try to incentivize, pay them, they probably don't recognize what Anjali was saying, the care. So just like care economy in unpaid care economy, in terms of when you look at gender and the family labor, there is a strong care economy in forestry. And that care economy has never been counted. So that's why if you pay carbon $5, also pay, you're giving an additional return. But how much community is investing in maintaining that forest probably is never counted. So time has come how we recognize that and how to take it forward. And we have with us today a very interesting panel who has rich experience in working at the interface of the community, both promoting community stewardship and also in a way trying to bring in other forest management experience with the community and trying to see how it can be adapted. So I think the panelists are there, and I have already invited them, but while asking them questions, I can again I'll reintroduce them because many audience have just arrived here. So my first questions to Dimgong Rangmei. So Dimgong is a youth leader in Manipur from Naga communities. He is executive director of an organization called RNBA, Realm for Nature-Based Action, which is working across Manipur and also now Nagaland, and he's trying to also bring together the Northeast NGO partners across Northeast. Dimgong, given your experience of working with indigenous communities, so though still this word is not legally applicable to India, the ethnic communities in Northeast India, what do you think are the main reasons of community stewardship stories we never heard, no, and often not recognized, even by communities as well as outside? What do you think the reasons are behind that?
Thank you, Pranav, and thank you, organizers, for this opportunity. Before coming to your question, climate change is real. In Manipur, we face the hottest degree in our district, 40-degree temperature, and catastrophic flood in Imphal, which never happened before, for the first time in Manipur district, and also currently another flood happening in Tripura. The fundamental difference between community stewardship and others around commons, for Northeast it is forest, is that the community look at these commons as source of life, integral part of life for the community. Because of that, they treat these commons as sacred, kind of divinity. So that makes a big difference. Having said that, this is not recognized. So why? One is that I think community in Northeast are quite humble, humility, So they are not just assertive, telling others, it is not like that. So whatever they are telling, with respect, humble, they are not just expel out what they are thinking. That is, I think, one. Also not exposed to media or all platforms. And then I think education systems, right from high school, of parents, teachers telling that, what your parents are doing is not good. You have to become officer, not to work again on this. Then again, if you look at the syllabus, if you go higher, college, university, forest, I think it is a legacy of colonel. That the kind of syllabus taught in forestry is not community stewardship. And now, can this be community stewardship as a subject to study in forestry university? So I think all these are some of the main reason why this community stewardship is not recognized, is not heard. Besides that, there is also stereotype, right? So outside world, educated people think that community stewardship is something which is not, good, not recognized, which is not really good. I think these are some of the main reasons why it is not recognized.
Very interesting. When I was a scientist in ICF, the first thing we were taught is that shifting cultivation is a deleterious practice. But when I visited Northeast, I realized it is a sophisticated forestry. So this is something, and see, everybody blame Northeast for zoom cultivation, but have you ever thought that 70% of the forest cover, so 70% of the geographical cover in Northeast is forest, despite zooming, and less than 10% of forest in Punjab and Haryana, and over whole mainland India, around 20% is forest cover. So, and then we go and teach forestry to Northeast communities. I think that is the way our education, mainstream thinking, the way brilliantly Dimgong narrated it. We have to blame ourselves the way they were recognized that. And I think that same mistake is being committed when we're designing standards for Vera, standards for gold standard, Plan Vivo, and telling how community will practice forestry. In the earlier session, Manya was telling biochar, there is a methodology of biochar prescribed by global standards, but the communities in Kutch, they know how to prepare better biochar, but that is not recognized. So this is something we have to see how we challenge the mainstream and bring it, take it forward. My next question to Amba. Amba has a rich experience as a conservationist and advising policy and practitioners in Northeast. Amba, given your extensive experience of working with government and civil society and development sector, what do you think are the current gaps that prevent community stewardship being recognized by the government and policy?
Thank you. Namaste and greetings on behalf of all the communities I represent. Also, a lot of friends who I think are much more better qualified to be sitting here than me, but here I am. So, thank you very much for having me. Well, in terms of the issue of community conservation areas and conservation practices of communities in the region, the biggest and the first challenge is the lack of understanding and appreciation of what communities are doing, even by the very governments that are managing the communities or governing the communities. So, for example, if you look at this whole issue of forest conservation or forest governance in the region, the Northeast has special constitutional status areas, all of it, and therefore communities own almost 80 to 90%, depending on states, of the land and its resources and the forests. And yet, the policies do not reflect that reality. And this is mainly, I feel it's because, and even if the policies do reflect, there continues to be this big lack of understanding and appreciation of the systems inherent within the communities. The second thing that we need to keep in mind or understand is there is a very strong constitutional foundation with regard to recognition in many ways. Recognition of rights, recognition of tenure, recognition that communities are doing this. But just mentioning that in the Constitution and having it has not translated into policies that look into streamlining what communities are doing into government planning, implementation, and administrative reforms. So this two together with other things is, yes, there is recognition actually, but again, the dangers of recognition sometimes is you wonder, do you want to be recognized or not by the government? Why do I say this? We have community conserved areas. Okay, it's called community conserved areas today because of the terminologies being evolved. But traditionally, every community, I'm sure even people sitting in this room, I'm sure all your communities did conserve certain patches of, whether it's a river or a forest or a wetland, there has been ways and means of conservation. And this in the region, in your places may have disappeared over time, but in the Northeast, fortunately, it continues to be very strong. Now, we have these conserved areas, and these are being, now, when the government says we will recognize, the danger is the moment these community conserved areas get recognized under the legal regime, in this case, the Wildlife Act, and they become community reserves, then the community's ability to access and interface and do things that they traditionally do and which has over time actually persisted and maintained the forest gets completely into a different scenario altogether. And that danger is there. And therefore, when we said recognition, what do we mean by recognition? Where should the lines be drawn? And how do we want to go about it? And the third point, I think, is the whole issue of we're very happy that communities are conserving. We're very happy that communities are doing this. But there is no devolution of powers to these communities. Governors are very happy recognizing them, saying, please continue recognizing and do what you're doing. But there is no real power that is given to communities. Power has been given in terms of village councils, which is basically the Panchayat Gram Sabha systems where the 73rd and 74th amendments have come in. But when it comes to issues of conservation, it remains with the forest department. It remains that every single step of planning, every single step of implementation continues to be with the government in many ways. So I think this is something that really needs to be done. And as civil society, as academia, as NGOs, I think the whole issue of how do we work with communities in terms of building capacities, documenting knowledge, and trying to understand what communities are doing, even before we start talking about policies, is something that we need to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Amba. I think excellent. I think these three threads, the way you clearly outlined, this whole recognition versus policy action, the risk of recognition. I think this is something we also realized in a recent study, how community management in the name of co-management become project management.
Right.
Yeah, so I think that transition when community reserve and then the state forest department start playing a role. And third thing, the way you bring in lack of devolution. Many times we try to recognize community, but we don't really devolve power to that. And very interesting thing, I think, that also is in some round I would request panel to consider this whole stewardship of community versus trusteeship of the state, because state forest department feel they are the trustee. I think this is the right moment, to move to the one aspect of stewardship is institution. And while Amba highlighted the role of tenure and institution, let me take this question to Prabhanjan, who is at the other side of this. So Prabhanjan is not directly working with community, but Prabhanjan is working with the project, with the state forest department in a JICA project. So Prabhanjan, what has been your experience in managing those projects, whether it is funded by JICA, be it in Nagaland, Tripura, and also Uttarakhand? Where and how do you think the traditional institutions such as village councils in Northeast and the way the joint forest management are being taken forward by these projects, how do you see that? Yeah.
Thank you, Pranav bhai, for having me in this panel, and good afternoon, everyone. As you said, I am supporting the projects, particularly the forest departments in terms of managing these projects. But I completely agree with Amba what he said in terms of the kind of challenges that the communities or their institutions face. Although these community institutions, village council, are recognized by the constitutional provisions, but when they come to joint forest management or a co-management of the forest resources with the forest department, it is always the forest department who is stay at a higher side because of their standing in terms of financing and also guiding the communities or their institutions in implementing this project. It's more like management of the forest resources rather than actually looking at the the stewardship of the forest by the communities. So the whole JFM framework, I see there is a misalignment with the community institutions or the traditional institutions that manages the forest. Like village council, when it is a kind of a apex body at the village, there are women organizations, there are youth organizations. They also play a very vital role in terms of conservation, managing conservation, and also looking or taking care of the forest resources that they have in their village. So why there is a misalignment is because basically in mainland states, the forest is owned by the forest department and the communities are basically government participate. And in this case, the role basically reversed. But still the forest department continues to have that play kind of a big brother's role in terms of guiding the communities or guiding the community institutions to manage their forest resources. So this misalignment is basically one of the major concern, and there is a need for re-looking at the joint forest management framework that has been prepared by the states, particularly in Nagaland or other northeastern states, and see how the community's traditional knowledge or their customary practices can be built into the JFM framework. Instead of imposing a JFM framework, which is a standard for the rest of India, and just customizing a bit to the context of northeastern state, it should be like a other way around. The communities or customary norms can be studied, documented, and then based on those requirements, the JFM framework should be reworked.
Thank you, Prabhanjan. There is I think, risk in most of these, nature-based projects that are being implemented for forest management in India and many parts of the world, where you see, I think today morning that discussion was there, we create more institutions at local level, like this Fora and Flora discussion was there. So while this new institutions are important, so now the concern is that when you create new institutions, how you integrate them or how you locate them vis-a-vis local institutions, village councils, panchayat and others. And we see there is, particularly in the forest governance management paradigm, there has not been much effort towards integrating local institutions. In that context, my questions to Gajala. So how do you say local institutions can be strengthened to play a more significant role in the resource governance, especially in the regions where traditional such structures are present?
Thank you very much, Pranav. You already said the context when you were talking in the beginning. You said that forest, if it is managed by forest, it is looked at in a very different way than the community forest when they get involved. So I think like my experience has been working in Chhattisgarh and Kutch both, and one can understand the Kutch being a desert, and Chhattisgarh where I work, it's a forest area with a good rainfall and predominantly tribal, and in Kutch it is mainly the pastoralist community. So when we look at the system, we look at how does it function on the ground, actually it is very contradictory, because what happens is all the laws which are governing these institutions are so contradictory. Like if you, for example, you look at Pesa, there are villages which are Pesa villages, but then communities don't know whether to have a Gram Sabha or go to a Gram Panchayat. So there's always this confusion, and in that, they completely lose out, because they don't have means, they don't have information actually to, because there are no systems, they're not people in the government who can guide them, that know this, because under Pesa this is applicable. So they always get confused, and then they completely get lost, and they completely get out of any entitlement, any facilities which they are supposed to be getting. So that's the challenge which one faces. Even when it comes to Forest Rights Act, or when you get a CFR, what happens is, when you get a CFR, then there are boundaries which are defined. Now these boundaries are beyond the institutions, the local institutions. It becomes a forest boundary, it becomes a title boundary, and the title boundaries don't actually match with the villages. Communities are homogeneous sometimes. They also are, they live in tandem with each other. But what happens is, these boundaries separate them. These boundaries also create a lot of conflict. And therefore, all these local institutions really suffer, because they don't know whom to approach, because there are so many systems which are working on the ground. It's Gram Panchayats, it's departments, it's different schemes, it is FRA, it's forest. When it comes to Kutch, it is also about the pastoralists. They don't have any law to govern them, because they are a nomadic tribe. They keep moving from places. They don't have a piece of land. In terms of forest, the forest is, the communities are using the forest, but most of the time they don't have titles. They don't have their CFR rights, they don't have their IFR rights. So they are like completely lost. And then the traditional systems, the traditional institutions are not being given or given recognition, or at least being given dignified status. So there's always this conflict which actually it's like a crossfire. The communities are really in crossfire. And I don't want to repeat what you both said, but when you were talking about your experience, I was thinking, this is exactly what happens in our region. Whether it's Chhattisgarh or Northeast, there's not much difference when it comes to, the governance and, reaching out to people, to communities, giving them that kind of due respect and acknowledging them. So that's where it is right now.
Thank you. We can take before starting next round, because I see a very rich audience here. So is there any reflection on this kind of discussion we are having around community stewardship, and particularly looking at the local institutions of governance and the way state and other projects interact with them? Is there any quick reflection? Yeah, but I'll request you to introduce yourself and be a little brief, so that we can have more such things coming in.
Yeah, my name is Vivekanandan, based at Madurai, Tamil Nadu. But we have been working with the pastoral communities and networking with the other NGOs. And that International Year for Rangeland and Pastoralism, 2026, United Nations has announced it. So we are working in that theme, So we come across the pastoralist groups, especially say in Bargur, in the Tamil Nadu and Karnataka border, there is one community called Lingayati communities. They have been conserving that local breeds. So every month, that for a particular season, they'll go to the inside the forest, and they camp there for 2 or 3 months. Once the crop is harvested, they come back to the plain lands. So these are the natural system, not only there at all over the India, if you see that nomadic communities, they have that mobility, that according to the season, and also they are helpful to the farming community. That system is not recognized. When JFM has come in Tamil Nadu and also in other states, they completely that dismantled. They completely that system, completely collapsed. So the traditional knowledge of during seasonal migration, it has been not recognized, and we are losing the breeds, their knowledge, their system, their penning system to farmers. So the entire system, now in the collapsing stage. So we have to see that it coincides with their traditional knowledge, their breeds. So that aspect we have to recognize, and it should be formalized. So for particular season, these people go to this place. Even interstate also they are doing. So unless we recognize, then we will be losing that local breeds, that knowledge, and that farming system, how they are benefit of, and how they contribute to the sustainable agriculture, organic farming, all this, they are all that intrinsically they are linked. So such things, we have to recognize. Thank you.
Hello, I am Arjun. It's a comment and a question. So I think in the many sessions that we have had, there's one part that I think which we would, at least in this, which is quite important, is getting the Department of Education into this. Because what we see is what a pastoralist child studies to what my kid studies, what another kid studies, the syllabus remains the same. It is not syllabus according to the geographical region or your occupation. So once the syllabus is the same and your education is so broad-based, once somebody goes into civil services, IAS or IFS, so they end up with the colonial idea of what the education was, and these traditional systems go missing because the child never learned these systems while, as a part of education. So is there anything where the Department of Education could become a part of this entire discourse and see these points of forest conservation, traditional knowledge system, pastoralism, become a part of that syllabus itself?
I am not aware of that, but if somebody can highlight. But I don't see someone here. Nuklu is here? No. So Nuklu was telling me, I think you must have heard Mr. Nuklu, who was in the inaugural plenary. So in Longlang, in some villages, he has initiated a system where the school is not working. In many places of Northeast, the school teachers are not, they go to the village. So even Dimgong is experimenting alternate school education. So government school don't work. So what he has done that with church and village council, they are providing a space and making all village children between 3 to 6 go to that space, and hiring a village graduate to teach them. But what they are doing excitingly, while this teaching is from Monday to Thursday, on Friday they are teaching all these things: the traditional knowledge system, local ecological practices, local culture, local skills. So I think something there also is happening in some areas as an alternative system, but in mainstream system I am not aware. I think a lot of hands. So, but I'll go in sequence. Joy, Jagdish, here and yeah. So yeah, Joy. I think let's on the mic.
My name is Joy. I'm from Pune. I work primarily on water, rivers, and that's the type of area I work. I came into the room maybe a couple of minutes late, so I don't know whether this was explained or not. If it is explained, I take back my question. We are using this word stewardship, and I'm increasingly hearing this in many sectors. Now, today we are talking about forest stewardship. Since I work in water, a couple of years now I've been hearing water stewardship. And we don't stop with only stewardship, but we also talk about water stewardship standards now. I am wondering two things. Pranav, you may be an expert and all the panelists, and I really enjoyed what all you said. Now, where did this word come from? Because at least I've been in this development sector for quite a number of years. You can see from my hair. It's a very recent entry, if I'm not mistaken. So where does this come from? What is its origin? Second issue is that, does this contribute anything new? in the terms of what we are all doing, communities are managing, governing, oh, that's all we want, democratizing, all type of thing. So this concept of stewardship, does it add anything or take away something from the communities? Where does it come from? At least in the water discourse, I've seen that probably this discourse is coming from a bit of an industry background. That's sort of a bit of reading I've done. So if you can, because we take it this concept as given, I think somewhere we need to problematize and see it adds something new to it or not, and empower the communities. So I hope my question is not out of place.
No, fairly agreeing. So definitely it is a Western construct. So we have been also discussing internally, but the way we look at forest stewardship is little different than the way water stewardship narrative has come in. Here, as Anjali was sharing, we are borrowing a theory and we are talking about care, knowledge and agency. So communities care, communities knowledge and communities agency, and we are trying to, in this particular, the way we are trying to, maybe you have to revisit the word, we can discuss more about that. The whole idea is here, can we showcase stewardship as a community-led initiative, community-governed initiative, vis-a-vis what state and market trying to bring in terms of forest management or landscape management paradigms. So it is we see a lot of investment, and it came as a response. It is a reaction rather than not a proactive thing. It came as a reaction to see how the payment for ecosystem service market, which is biodiversity market, carbon market, the way they are trying to impose a kind of standards, certifications and methodologies on communities to take care of the resources and get some payment, or the way state want to bring in scientific forest management or conservation restoration. So can we showcase this whole community knowledge, agency and care as an alternative to that? So that is, it is alternative thinking, but the packaging of word, the theories can always discuss and take it forward. Yeah, Jagdish.
Yeah. I was just wondering about what Amba was saying. And if we have that constitutional kind of an enshrinement of village people owning the land, yeah, and that's what I would have espoused for in the rest of the country, on PISA, or something very situated, very localized, Gram Sabha. Yet what I heard Amba say was that's not sufficient. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient. I think the kind of conversations that we are having in other rooms, we're greatly relying on some degree of constitutional recognition going all the way to the Gram Sabha level. But what I hear and what I think we need to talk about is the framing just an enactment of the law, or what else needs to be done alongside that? Yeah.
No, I think it's more of a reiteration of what I said, but I think what Jagdish is saying is very, very right, because many a times, even if you look at the way India goes about signing treaties and conventions, and when it comes back to India and the laws and policies that are framed, the intention and the implementation does not meet often. And I think that's exactly almost at that level.
I think Jagdish, partly, to some small extent, I think Prabhanjan answered that question. Even if in Nagaland, more than 90% of forest is owned by the communities, state is trying to bring in joint forest management, and the state forest officials, with a legacy of being taught at IGNFA and looking at other joint forest management paradigm, trying to execute that there with same mindset. So while there is a pure community-led tenure system, but state, by bringing in their power and some kind of money, some kind of system, they are also alluring. So there are examples of villages withdrawing from JICA in Nagaland, but very few. Villages withdrawing from PS in Meghalaya, but very few. So I think despite there is a constitutional thing, the way I think state operates, I think this policy and practice what I think Amba are trying to bring in, maybe we can look at that. Yeah, Bidut bhai. Yeah, so from there, I think it is not the way, it is the way who raised the hand first.
So myself, Bidut, I am from Odisha, and I am coming from an area where this jhum cultivation, like we called it puduchas, that is so much defamed. How people are, tribal people are defamed and by the so-called experts. And my question is that, since last so many years we are talking about this JFM model, and in the post-CFR regime, it is high time we should dismantle the whole GFM model, JICA and everything. Isn't it? how I mean, that is my personal opinion, also opinion of so many community members. So we should work towards that collectively, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Before. Yeah. Before and then you, yeah. Then we'll come back to the panel, yeah.
Hello. My question is also very similar to. Oh, yeah, I am Vibhor Dev from UNDP. My question is very similar to Vidut Bhai, but my question is for Prabhanjan only. We all know that JFM model came as per the 1991 circular of Ministry of Environment and Forest, but after the implementation of forest sector, there is Gram Sabha who having community for resources, they will manage their own resources, and the ministry even in the last guideline for CFR conservation and management has written very clearly that wherever these CFR management committees are established, constituted, and then any other committees in parallel to the conservation of the forest has to be replaced by the CFR management committee. So what is the thought, I mean, going across the MOEF and particular this JICA project management unit, whatever be your institutions and for this implementation of JICA, and how you see this legitimate regime that has come in and how you are going to incorporate in your planning and policies changes so that it is not in arbitrary to the legislation that is already enacted by the Parliament of India, and in that the stewardship, how that which has been recognized under Forest Act, even in the community forest management practices, I mean conservation management practice. So how you look at these things, so your answer on that.
Thank you, Vivor, for this question. So as you said very rightly, after even Vidut Bhai also said, after the CFR recognition, so the whole JFM concept becomes obsolete because it's the community who owns the resource and they will manage their resource, and they see how better they manage and how better they utilize that in terms of generating economic opportunities or values out of that. So that way, of course, I agree in terms of looking back to the JFM framework and how it can be really reworked in and aligning to the CFR management principles. That's one. Second thing, the project where I am working currently is Nagaland, which is a community regime. So the communities are already, the CFR is not applied there because of the northeastern region, and the CFR, the whole community conservation areas, the entire forest land is basically owned by the communities. So there they are already into practice, like based on their customary practices, their traditional practices, they do their, manage their forest. Like Pranab Bhai was saying sometimes back, if you go to a Konyak area, you will see how scientifically they are managing the jhum cultivation and also conserving and restoring the land that they are cultivating for their food production. So that way, I agree in terms of re-looking at the JFM framework and also making a shift from the JFM to a CFR management.
My question was, is there a dialogue inside the MOEF?
That I need to check. I'm not aware about that, but I need to check. Maybe Pranab Bhai, if you know.
I think at some point even JICA was trying to discuss whether they will support JFM or CFR. But that conversation, I think, it was in some meetings, but it didn't continue. See, as an external aid agency, JICA is willing to support forest governance. So whatever, even JFM was not there P90, but they were badly supporting forest department. So I don't think there will be, for supporting forest management paradigm, one instrument will be critical. But bigger challenge what we are discussing, be it CFR or JFM, when project and state and market comes to play working with that, so it become a project management. So that is the challenge. So local governance institutions, they don't get space. Yeah, please.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, my name is Onring Langu. I'm from Tata Institute of Social Science, Mumbai. So my question, I don't know, anyone can respond, but if Amba Jamir can respond to this. So is there any point where traditional knowledge system and Christianity belief converse, which could help in conservation commons? Like for example, the indigenous worldview is quite different from what Christianity worldview. the Christian story is very different from what the Christianity believe, and also the belief, the traditional belief of like spirit exists everywhere, mountain, river, spring, so but the Christianity belief where spirits are evil, and then so the sacred grove, or like there's a earlier there was a practice, and still now it has become a little bit symbolic, but still belief system is there that spirit exists, and then they believe onto that spirit. So my question is on that, whether Christianity and then the traditional system can come together to continue.
Well, in a way, you have answered the question yourself. But before such forms of institutionalized religions came, we were animistic in whatever we did. And at that point in time, everything that we did was governed by nature, whether it's on terra firma or above. So that was it. And I think there is no comparison to what institutionalized religions, whether it's Christianity or whatever, can play or compare with that, because the faith system, the belief system at that time had no third party. It was a direct one-to-one. Whereas when you had these institutions, those institutions became the via media, and things do go wrong in many places.
Yeah, I'll just quickly comment. I think two more and so there are also two threads to it. I think complementing to what Amba was telling. Like in Orissa, we have seen there are sacred groves, which through animism communities practice, and we have seen their Sanskritization. The whole fortress conservation theory come from Catholic principles of conservation. So yeah, we have to also see both those coins. Yeah.
Hello, I have a question. Oh. No. I have my hands up. Yeah. My name is Rutini Lokem, Kanono Foundation, Nagaland. I want to again refocus myself into our topic, community stewardship and indigenous knowledge. I understand that it's also a matter of articulation. Now, as a community, I might be doing something around stewardship, but I may not know it is stewardship, like in the way we think. So, so there's also, from my perspective, I see there's a gap in articulation of what the state thinks, what the department could think, and what the community could think. And I want the perspective of the panelists and the people on the dais. Do you think that we should have a course, or maybe have a new way to kind of look at our course, or a course structure, not for the students, or not for maybe like indigenous community members, but for policymakers, and then for like people who are studying in IIFM, so that they understand a certain articulation of how they would be able to, because no matter what we articulate, what comes down as part of policy document and as part of the larger discourse percolates into like what we also say in the village or in communities around the kind of the words we use. So that is just my reflection, and I think any thoughts on that?
We'll be reflecting on that last round, but I think Arjun's point and your point is, I think, it's a way forward, how to engage with that. But yeah.
Good evening, I'm Saida Noor Fatima from FES. Responding to what Mr. Arjun raised, you asked like if there is anything done, Balki. There is an experiment done in Karnataka in terms of rural libraries, converting rural libraries as learning centers. Under the stewardship of Ms. Uma Mahadevan, what we did was, we gave projects to children. We encouraged children to come to the village library, and one assignment that was given was a project not on subjects in the books, anything related to that particular village that they come from. It can be a plant, it can be a game, it can be anything. Maybe a person in the village who has achieved something like that. So gradually what happened is, the school teachers started involving. First, it was elected representatives who came and started helping the children. Then it was education department, then Anganwadi worker also started coming over there. The senior citizens of that village came, and some CBOs, NGOs, they all started coming. Within a span of 6 months, the libraries really got turned into learning centers with beautiful projects, with pictures. In fact, we were stunned to see some of very rare medicinal plant information being brought by the children. Very rare treatment aspects being shared. Even today, if you visit some of the libraries, especially in Kodagu Belt and HT Kote region and all, you will see the projects done by children which has beautiful knowledge. And this is not only prepared by children, but it is a model of convergence, we would say. And teachers, gradually this activities started, the teachers also started taking into their curriculum related activities. So like this, it can happen, but I'm sure, in a very formal way, introducing in the syllabus may not be possible, but this is what, a space that has been created, and it has been very successful. Thanks.
Thank you. No. In the front row, no. And then, both of you are there, and then you. So I think this is going to be an exciting session. So, I think the OA audience are participating. It's brilliant. Yeah.
हेलो एवरीवन, मेरा नाम अनु है. मैं इंटरनेशनल लैंड कोलिशन से में हूँ. मेरा एक क्वेश्चन तो नहीं कहूँगी, रिफ्लेक्शन है कम्युनिटी और स्टूअर्डशिप दोनों इस टर्मिनोलॉजी को लेके. मुझे लग रहा था कि बहुत स्ट्रगल है, बहुत सारे समुदायों ने बहुत संघर्ष किया है अपने आप की एक डिफरेंट आइडेंटिटी के लिए, एक डिस्टिंक्ट आइडेंटिटी के लिए. वो ट्राइबल्स हों, वो विमेन हों, वो यूथ ग्रुप हों, लेकिन कम्युनिटी में क्या हम कम्युनिटी कह के are we really doing justice to their struggle, the years and centuries of their struggle, by just bringing them together under one community as the homogeneous category, but they are not. And we all know about it. The second is stewardship. So we have, हमने representation की पहले बात की, हमने participation की बात की, अब हम stewardship की बात कर रहे हैं, और हम सब यूज़ करते हैं. मैं ये प्रश्न और नहीं है, लेकिन जस्ट एक रिफ्लेक्शन की, इसमें क्या हम जो पावर शिफ्ट की बात है, जो एजेंसी की बात है, क्या हम उसको तो डाइल्यूट नहीं कर देते हैं? कभी हम जब स्टूअर्डशिप की बात करते हैं और ये जार्गन्स में घूमते रहते हैं, कभी एक के बाद एक दूसरा जार्गन आ जाता है, और ये हमें पता है कि आता भी हमारी कम्युनिटीज़ से नहीं आ रहा है, बट वो अडॉप्ट करें. जो आज हम बात कर रहे थे, दे अडेप्ट टू द लैंग्वेज ऑफ द वेस्ट, एंड वी डू दैट. But then in entire thing, are we really justifying these struggles? And who are we to justify? But are there just the struggles justified by using these terms and just?
Yeah. Just to quickly respond, so we are not homogenizing community, neither homogenizing stewardship. So this is like common. This is a term to say, like Anjali was telling, the gradient. The way community stewardship will be highlighted and rewarded, recognized and promoted in Manipur will be different from Odisha. Within a Naga village will be different Kuki village. Within a Rongmei Naga village will be different from a Sema Naga village. Within X Rongmei village will be different from Y Rongmei village. So that is clear. Communities are different and stewardship will be different. Regarding power, in stewardship, one of the elements is agency. We talk about tenure, power, politics, institution. Another is knowledge. So it is in a way like commons, maybe a kind of principle, maybe a kind of, so we are not trying to jargonize it. We're open to discuss, other terms for it, but we have to highlight the power of communities, role of communities in conservation. So this is something has been really, so far we feel, not been done justice with. So it has been co-opted, it has been taken away, it has been, dealing with community in a different way. So this is time has come to reward, recognize, empower and respect community for their work. So we can devise different terms for that. There will be diversity, but that is the approach. So it is not like just trying to rediscover another thing. Yeah, please.
Okay, good evening. My name is Mailmit. I'm basically an environment activist from Sikkim. But when we are talking about indigenous knowledge, like all my this years of working as an activist, like it's very important that I'm speaking in my context, my community, that a lot of our research been done by the outsider. It means like on Lipcha community, in the indigenous community. A lot of the Americans, Europeans, even that of Indian have done a lot of studies. But what I've realized is like we as a community, I think we have realized that we have to do our own research in our community. Because a lot of research which is done by the outsider have taken all the knowledge, all the data, all the information, and just for their degree and for their job or whatever. But like what we have realized is like the community, like we've been doing like research in our community, the knowledge will be with the community. So that is very, very important because a lot of our indigenous knowledge, like the priests and priestess we call Mun and Bungting, they have so much knowledge with them and they're dying with the age in the village. Like the youngsters in the search of better education and job, they are moving from the rural areas to the metropolitan cities. And they are not, there are a huge gap between the knowledge, between the elders and the younger generation. So with that context, what we did was like 6 months, it was a small project on Lipcha clan workshop. Like we collected the origin stories, the Lipcha, we have different clans like other indigenous community. So we worked on we got 2 pairs, the elder generation and younger generation. So to bring, so while doing that, we could feel that all this clan, their origin stories based on ecologies from the environment, from the geographical areas. So it was so powerful and so, it's like we could do with the only 15 because lack of fun. But the saddest part is like a lot of the origin stories, like the origin stories who's coming from a lake that has been destroyed by some hydropower. And some other one is from spring that is also good because in Sikkim we have more than 30 hydropower. So these are the things that has needed to be, So this is like, and at the end we are trying to do is like, these days nobody reads all the stories. So with that concept we came out with grassroots comics. So 4 panel or 6, 8 panel, that will be a very child friendly. And even we made a scan. Tomorrow I've got a session. I'll show that copy of that grassroots comic that we have made a scan. People who doesn't read and write also can, they can, after scanning, they can hear the audio of the old people speaking in Lipcha language and has been translated in English also. And I think this is like, it's not, let's not wait that government will do, Sarkar will kiya, ye wo will kiya. I think initiative should come from the community because it's high time that we have to protect our own knowledge. Because recently, like Sikkim mein Lona Glacier Lake outburst hua. All the bridges got washed away. But now, till today, I came from out of my region. I crossed a bridge which has been made by the indigenous community, cane and bamboo. The Indian army who is in the border are using the same thing. And I'm just wondering, if our indigenous knowledge nahi hai to, how people will do? These are the things we should really appreciate. We should feel pride of our own knowledge, So just a sharing with you all.
No. What you have been doing is an excellent example of stewardship, but also how you are, doing intergenerational knowledge transfer. So that is more important. It is not about documenting and taking it outside. It is about passing on to the younger generation and take it forward. Thank you very much. Yeah, Sahil and these two, and then I think we'll stop and ask comment. Otherwise, your time is over.
Yeah. Right. Hi everyone. My name is Sahil. I work with the Climate Rise Alliance at Dasra. Just a bunch of reflections, questions, and also a little bit of a rant. Is that firstly, I think piggybacking of what ma'am said, when you zoom out and I think about community stewardship, say 50 years from now, are the people from the youth specifically, right? India is moving towards a more aspirational economy where people are aspiring for, moving out of their current certain ecosystems and into more, cities or wherever. So are we then, say, expecting the same communities to be where they are currently to take up some of these community stewardship projects? I mean, for me, that keeps me up at night, right? Because it's a wrong expectation that I would have on someone else. I don't know, what the solution to that be. It would be probably converting people from cities to, move to the rural, or I don't know how that works out. So that's the first thing. Secondly, on, again, indigenous knowledge, right? As ma'am said, there's a lot of outsiders coming in, outsiders including myself, coming in, trying to document indigenous knowledge without any understanding of what indigenous knowledge means except using those 2 words. And so how am I actually passing down this knowledge to the communities, right? So ma'am spoke about comic books as one way of doing that. I think that's brilliant. It'll be interesting if similar models are there across. That's that and that. And the third, which is the rant, which is what I want to get into, is that in larger the social sector, I see this happening. Outsiders coming in, researching, quote unquote, helping out people from certain communities, and then going off for their masters, right? And then never again coming back to the same communities. And it's not just in the Northeast. You open LinkedIn and you see everyone going to certain, under-resourced, quote unquote, under-resourced areas, and then going for their masters to Yale or Harvard. Clearly, those are under-resourced. So, I mean, I don't know what's happening in the social sector. It's a trend that I see of people of my age, and I'm also culpable and guilty of the same. I don't want to bring it up that, but I don't know if that's a great thing for the social sector 20 years from now. So, yeah, that's it.
Good reflection style. Yeah. Sanjay ji and...
Thank you.
That's Sanjay. Okay.
Okay. Just, I'll make a very quick point. Just to share my reflection on the whole question of stewardship, etc. I came across an article quite some time back in which the author writes, takes a cue from the book of Genesis of the Bible, and how God created man and woman, of course, Adam and Eve, and gave him dominion over the world. And perhaps the aspect, the component of arrogance, selfishness, greed, etc. comes in. And that's the reason why the human being also has plundered and pillaged the world, as a result of which we see the ecological degradation today. But I think there is also a possibility. This is also a question of hermeneutics, how we interpret the Bible. And therefore the same author also brings in the aspect of how God has made man, and he's the tool maker. Man is the only tool maker under the sun. And therefore, he only has the prehensile hands, not other animals or other beings, other creatures, etc. So therefore, perhaps that happens, or that's the interpretation. But then there is also a possibility of convergence, as we get from the tribal epistemology. A lot of knowledge comes in, and then there is a possibility of convergence between Christianity and indigenous knowledge, etc. But this is interesting in terms of taking it forward. Because as we see today what's happening, and therefore also is counting on the tribal epistemology, so that we are able to address the problems of the world today. And therefore technology alone or scientific progress alone is not going to solve the problem of ecological degradation, but there has to be brought in that element of human greed, pride, arrogance, etc. That has to be tackled. So therefore bringing these together will only address the problem of the world today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sanjay. And then last.
Yeah. Hello. So I'm Sanjay Sharma. I'm representing FES from the Northeast. While we have been discussing about the stewardship, we're talking about lack of recognition to the communities for conserving their natural resources. And in FES we are engaging with the communities in Manipur, Nagaland, and Meghalaya especially. We were just looking at some of the acts which are like kind of giving protection to the communities or to the forest communities. So we came across the Nagaland Village and Area Councils Act 1978, which like gives mandate to the village councils to manage the wildlife. So are we, this for Amba especially, are we like saying that this act is insufficient, or we need to strengthen this act, or something better act is required to kind of recognize the communities? Yeah.
Thanks, Sanjay. Yeah, of course. As I said, the acts are there, but each act needs a rule which makes the act enforceable. There are no rules as yet that translate this constitutional legitimate powers to the community. Even if there are no rules, there are no mechanisms in place for this to happen. Even the Biodiversity Act, for that matter, the rules, Nagaland State Biodiversity rules does give this recognition to the communities. But I think having said that, not holding the mic in the hand, we can also not romanticize communities too much. Mind you, within the communities also we do have people of all sorts. There are conflicting interests in community. If you think of modern concepts like neo-tribal capitalism, where it is from within the community where a lot of wrong things are also happening. So I think we need to also keep this in mind when we speak communities and not just be over romantic about it. Yeah.
Thank you. I think this is very important, addition. Community, also let us think about the community power structure, community dynamics. Yeah, last question.
Yeah, I just had an idea that I want to share because what she had spoken about and what Sahil had spoken about, researchers coming into the community. I'm Nina, by the way, and I belong to the Garo community from Meghalaya, and I work with Anu in the International Land Coalition. I think one is to examine the way we look at information in a decolonial way, in the sense that is only written knowledge going to be credible, right? There's oral wisdom that we have, a huge history and archives of course not documented. But I also work on the intersections of media and tech. And I can tell you that there are a lot of space where you can leverage tech in actually forming digital libraries. Somebody mentioned rural libraries, but there's also scope for building these digital archives, these open source data, right? Where young people, everybody has a smartphone, can go and record their grandparents, anybody, testimonies, lived experiences are also knowledge. And that can be, used and disseminated and owned. And the other thing that I want to mention was I used to work for an organization called Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact, and they developed something called the Indigenous Knowledge Data Sovereignty, which is a framework to address those questions of ownership of data, of indigenous data, generated by indigenous communities and owned by indigenous communities. So that's something that maybe I can share a link to. And yeah, in terms of allyship, I think you have to examine what your allyship looks like. It can't be extractive, obviously. You need to create as many spaces as you can to bring those people with you. There are many people like, the gentleman from Odisha, talk to each other, create space, see how you can collaborate, and just give them the mic. Just pass the mic. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. So I'll also pass the mic now to the panelist. Yeah. So I think, this digital library you were talking about, Dimgang is a living example what he is doing now. He has started a YouTube channel, and he has been sharing his ideas in Rongmei language with Rongmei communities. I think he has become very popular now, and every week you are doing that. So he's using the power of YouTube to reach out to his communities and share. I think he also spoken about community stewardship. So excellent. I think it's a really community stewardship session. Yes. So we have communities sharing with each other and trying to see how we exchange knowledge, and how the ideas can be taken forward. So any last words of we have 1 minute because we started at 4:10, but we can take 4-5 minutes. So half a minute to 1 minute.
Thank you so much. True. Couple of things. Like when you say policies and act, one is top down. It is not bottom up. Second is that in Manipur example, in the hill, it is under Article 371C. It is empowered to hill area committee to, formulate policies around all these forests and land, but they didn't do that. So a lot of legal gaps in there. So they are doing customary law while Forest Department is overlapping claims on forest. So a lot of gaps, not just processes, but for example, Village Authority Act 1956 in Manipur is not comprehensive enough. We have to amend that, not lack of just processes. And all others. So I think one is around these policies, legal framework. We need to come together and work so that we can make it bottom-up thing. That is one. Second is just forest, we cannot isolate from land. So we are also starting documentation of land tenure system in Manipur and also some part of Nagaland. Now, oral practices. So a lot of complexities around land in Northeast. So if we don't document it, then a lot of conflict, vested interest coming in, and a lot of chance. It's quite vulnerable actually because of lack of documentation of that tenure system in the Northeast. Now, I think way forward a little bit is that we are recently formed Northeast Together, thinking that, as we discussed in the previous sessions, that we should come together different actors. We should come together and work together because time is quite limited. We need to work together so that, be it in education, we started briefly in private schools, in government school in Manipur, not just in YouTube, but we also started telling that education must be relevant in there. So we started teaching our children, inviting all people to come and tell what they are doing. Zoom cultivation and others, culture, tradition. Also, we develop project-based learning for children. Let them develop project based on whatever relevant to their culture, tradition. So this we are starting with private school and some government school. All of this we need to come together, and unionization, collectivization, I think that is something way forward. Thank you.
Yeah. I think a lot has been spoken by the way forward, and a lot of things came from the audience. But I think, what I would say is that, the way forward is to work with young people, because it's very important. Whatever has happened, the intergenerational knowledge which is there, which, as you said, it's very important to, celebrate it. Not only document it, but celebrate it and feel pride about it. Have to feel good about it. So all the young people who are with whom we are engaging, I think they have to take this legacy forward. So that should be the way forward, and that's how the conservation will happen. That's how protection of forest will happen. That's how the rules. Of course, there are a lot of gaps. We can keep on going and talking about it for hours and hours. But then in that, whatever is possible, whatever positivity is there, utilizing it. And then Arjun also talked about education. I think education is a very, very important aspect of this whole work of stewardship, because education and young youth going forward is the answer, and that's where we feel that there is a space and there is a way forward. So that's what I would say. Thank you.
Well, much has been said. When we think of community stewardship, I think it's much, much beyond forests, if you think of it. And if you look at the way community institutions are going, the sad reality is community institutions are getting diminished every day. The community lands are getting under a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure, not just from development activities, not just from extractive mining activities and so many other activities, but even the struggle for power dynamics is a reality. And this is something we need to keep in mind as we think about and go about in the future. Working with young people is really, really important. I would also like to reiterate that. Only unfortunate thing is there's a lot of young people who are no longer in the communities, and this is getting to be a big, big challenge. The lack of intergenerational exchange of knowledge is another big challenge that is happening. And finally, if we have to continue talking about stewardship and community conservation, I think the role of women cannot be ignored. They are the knowledge keepers. They are the custodians of knowledge, be it for seeds, be it for community mobilization, or be it for educating the new younger generations. So I think that's something we really, really need to keep in mind. Thank you.
Maybe from the project management perspective, I would like to say, in the Northeast region, there are a lot of investments are coming from the external aided projects, whether it is JICA, World Bank, IFAD, or KFW. And what I feel there is a need for a kind of a regional network within northeastern states to basically look at these investments, because whether it is a forestry or agriculture project, anyway, all these investments are going into the forest land or the community-owned land. So there has to be a strong advocacy group, maybe led by civil society organizations or the community organization, to look at these projects and how they are planning their investments, and maybe looking at a higher, elevated place, and see how these investments are really bringing impacts, considering the customary norms and the traditional knowledge that the communities have.
Thank you. You wanted to say something? Yeah, but I think I give you my 1 minute to you, so you can yeah. I realized that I didn't give you time. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Anubhav. I teaching in engineering college in Chhattisgarh. Give a lot of, I thought I just coming from the education perspective, because I am in the business of teaching. I am very cynical about what formal education can achieve being in it. So for example, now we teach there are courses called environmental science which are taught all over this country. I working in IIT, environmental science is taught to all BTech students. It's not taught by any social scientist, it's taught by a chemistry professor. Which is similar across other such IITs, right? It's from a very technocratic perspective. We've been talking about in this convening about how there is a need to decentralize processes, planning processes, governance processes. There's a very big need to decentralize how we do education. Unfortunately or fortunately, it's becoming more and more centralized. Again, in the small bubble of the IITs, it's not that much of a problem. But if you talk to university teachers, what you teach comes from not very far from here. It comes from Delhi. The syllabus is decided in Delhi. How you teach it is decided here. And then you just have to get it. So a lot of people... So when we start moving towards decentralizing how education also happens, in not special, privileged places like IITs, it's easier, right? But in universities, in state government universities, in colleges, how do you decentralize education also? Schools, it happens much more easily. You've given that example. I've heard of similar examples. Chhattisgarh mein aapne suna hoga. Schools mein, primary schools mein, it is happening. But at the college level, it's somehow still very difficult because we are, instead of decentralizing, we are actually centralizing education. At least in यहाँ पे हमको बात करें कि we should decentralize. Education is becoming more and more centralized, unfortunately. Not a very happy note.
Thank you. So can I take another 1 minute to summarize? Thank you. So I think it's a brilliant session and it is really a community session and the stewardship, real stewardship coming in. But I completely agree with Joy that we need to challenge this construct because many of the construct when talk about stewardship is from bottom up, decentralized, but why should it will be a Western construct? I think we need to think about that. What is the way forward I see? Maybe again deconstructing community. When talking about community stewardship, not looking community as a looking at the diversity, but at the same time the power relations with the community and see how the stewardship is not led to a elite capture. I think Amba had highlighted that very pretty well. Way forward seems to be decentralizing education, digitizing education, and seeing that how this alternate knowledge systems can be transformed from old to young generation and how that can inform our landscape governance, forest governance. And also at the same time, how we involve more young and women communities, women members, and very aptly said by Amba, even in the forestry and landscape governance, we see the most of knowledge system come from women. So how we take it forward. And last but not the least, the project management in Northeast or all these states must be very well informed by the local communities. And I think Dimgang, you have formed the Northeast together. Yeah. The next task is to engage with World Bank, KFWs, and all of them. And thank you very much for a very productive session. And thank you. See you tomorrow. Sorry. We have something to reward out to our great stewards.
That's a nice word for bearers, actually.
Maybe one group photograph?
One for you also.
Oh, yeah.